Hello, my name is Michael Volpe. I'm a member of the Board of Directors of the Village Preservation and Improvement Society here in Falls Church, Virginia, otherwise known as VEPAS. For almost 40 years, VEPAS has had special meetings of its members and the general public on July 4th to commemorate the important documents that led to our independence as a sovereign nation. However, because of the pandemic, many venues have closed and public gatherings have been banned or severely limited. We at VEPAS wanted to continue to celebrate these important documents in our nation's history by presenting this short video to highlight the elements and the histories of these documents. While we cannot perform a public reading of these documents at this time, we encourage you to watch this video and click on the booklet that is normally used for our readings. The booklet is available on our website, vpis.org. We begin with a document called the Fairfax Resolves, which were issued in July 1774. This action followed a series of events primarily in Boston, Massachusetts, which included the Boston Massacre, the Boston Tea Party, and the retaliatory actions of the English Parliament in passing the Stamp Act and a group of acts labeled the Intolerable Acts. These intolerable acts allowed British citizens who were charged with offenses in the colony to have their trials moved to another colony or to England. The acts dissolved the Massachusetts Colony Charter of 1691 and vested authority in officials designated by the Crown. The acts closed the port of Boston until restitution was made for the tea that was destroyed in the Tea Party. And finally, the Quebec Act removed the land between Ohio and Mississippi rivers and the lucrative fur trade that was going on there from colonial control and designated the province of Quebec as the authority along with the French language and the Roman Catholic religion. So in response to this setting, this history of what was happening in Boston at that time, the Virginia House of Burgesses proclaimed that on July 1st, 1774, that would be set aside as a day of fasting, humiliation, and prayer in support of the colonists in Boston. The royal governor of Virginia dissolved the Virginia House of Burgesses, and the Burgesses adjourned to meet in the Raleigh Tavern in Williamsburg. And they decided that each of the counties should elect delegates to a special convention to meet in August of that year. George Washington and Charles Broadwater were elected as delegates from Fairfax County, and they and others met in Alexandria to draft a document to, quote, define our constitutional rights, unquote, and to serve as instructions for the Fairfax delegates in the convention later that summer. The language of these resolves was drafted by George Washington and George Mason. This is a very long document, taking 12 pages in the booklets, covering 24 resolves. But some of the key points are as follows. The colonists in Fairfax, Virginia, considered themselves to be British citizens, governed by British laws, and subject to taxation to support and defend the British Empire. But these colonists were not the slaves of the empire, nor should they be deprived of their right of their voice in Parliament. Taxation and representation were declared to be inseparable rights. And finally, one of the key principles that I noticed is that it said that slaves should not be imported into any colony during this time. And, quote, "We take this opportunity of declaring our most earnest wishes to see an entire stop forever put to such a wicked, cruel, and unnatural trade," unquote. The next document that we would read at these VPAS gatherings was the Virginia Declaration of Rights, which was adopted in June 1776, just before the Declaration of Independence. Again, George Mason is considered to be the primary drafter of this document, and this document contains 16 statements. Among them are that all men are by nature equally free and independent, and have certain inherent rights, the enjoyment of life and liberty. That all power is vested in the people. That the legislative and executive powers should be separate and distinct from the judicial. That a man shall have a right in a capital or criminal prosecution to know the accusation, to confront witnesses, to call for evidence in his favor, and to receive a speedy trial by jury, and to be found guilty only by unanimous vote of that jury, and that the party cannot be compelled to give evidence against himself. The freedom of the press was labeled as one of the greatest bulwarks of liberty and cannot be restrained. And finally, that all men are equally entitled to the free exercise of religion. Many of you are familiar with the next document, the Declaration of Independence, and the roles played by Thomas Jefferson and others to draft this document and to get the agreement of those gathered in Philadelphia at the Continental Congress to reach consensus on this document. We typically, in our readings at VPAS, would in unison read the first two paragraphs of this, and we would stand in order to do so. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with one another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impelled them to this separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute a new government, laying out its foundation on such principles and organizing its power in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Following the Revolutionary War and the treaty between England and the fledgling United States of America, many efforts were made to develop a constitution, and that constitution was finally approved in 1789. But the Bill of Rights was not adopted until the first 10 amendments were approved in 1791. And these amendments drew heavily upon the language and the ideas contained in the Virginia Bill of Rights. Again, I would encourage you to look at our booklet as the Bill of Rights document is laid out in that booklet. One document that has been recently discussed is the Emancipation Proclamation. And that was signed by President Lincoln in the fall of 1862, and it was effective on January 1st in 1863. The key paragraph there is that on the first day of January, 1863, all persons held as slaves within any state or designated part of the state, the people whereof shall be then in rebellion against the United States, shall be thenceforth and forever free. And the executive government of the United States, including the military and naval authority thereof, will recognize and maintain the freedom of such persons, and will do no acts to repress such persons or any of them in any efforts they make for their actual freedom. That document is not in the booklet that I described earlier, but I'm sure that you can find it very easily. The final document that we would use at the time of our readings of these important documents at VIPAS was the Pledge of Allegiance. The original Pledge of Allegiance was written by Francis Bellamy, the circulation manager of the Youth's Companion magazine, which was based in Boston. Mr. Bellamy was a native of Rome, New York. The pledge was printed first time on September 8, 1882, in a magazine that was circulated to public schools across America. To celebrate the 400th anniversary of Columbus's voyage to America, over 12 million school children recited the Pledge of Allegiance on October 12, 1892. The first change in wording came in 1923 at the National Flag Conference. In 1942, Congress officially recognized the pledge, and on June 14, 1954, President Dwight D. Eisenhower signed a resolution of Congress amending the Pledge of Allegiance to add the words, "Under God." Again, we would stand at this time at the readings, and in unison, we would read the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I want to thank you for joining me in this video of the important documents that VIPAS recognizes, and I wish you the very best holiday on July 4th of this year. Thank you.